In the year 1480, Confucian courtiers ransacked the imperial archives. They sought to destroy every trace of one of the Ming dynasty's greatest achievements. The logbooks of the Starfleet, the greatest armada of wooden ships ever assembled, were consigned to the flames. From the smoke and ashes of that fire came a mystery that would tantalize the world. Just how far had China's imperial fleet pushed the boundaries of the known world? Could it have even reached America before Christopher Columbus? A remarkable man stands at the heart of this great mystery. His name was Zheng He, still revered as a god in parts of the East. Once a hero in China. The most powerful of the court eunuchs, his loyalty in battle brought him great rewards. The emperor made him admiral of the Ming fleet. In 30 tumultuous years, his fleet of 300 ships and some 28,000 men undertook 7 epic voyages. Until recently, that saga was neglected and little known outside China. But in China, some traditional storytellers have never forgotten the heroic exploits of the great Zheng He.
The emperor declared, "Who is willing to take the command and go to the Western Ocean as my marshal?" Zheng He has been rewarded for his bravery. He is a talent. But he is too old. What a pity. No, no, I say. The older the ginger, the hotter it is.
One man, more than anyone else, was to spread Zheng He's fame to the West. In 2002, a retired submarine commander called Gavin Menzies delivered a sensational lecture at the Royal Geographical Society in London.
Someone was in the Caribbean in 1424, 70 years before Columbus.
Menzies had delivered a bombshell. Menzies argued that in 1421, almost a century before Magellan, Zheng He's fleet had circumnavigated the world. He has expanded his theories in a best-selling book. If Menzies was right, Zheng He had reached the New World before any European explorer. For years, Zheng He's grave lay virtually unnoticed, tended only by his family in Nanking.
For almost 600 years, the family came here quietly, with no fuss. Very few people even knew the tomb was here.
The full extent of Zheng He's 7 voyages is now a subject of intense interest and controversy.
Of course, he was to lose his life on the 7th voyage. His tomb contains nothing but his clothes and shoes.
So much has been lost or destroyed, but Zheng He's story can be pieced together from inscriptions on the stone tablets he erected.
The emperor sent envoys to foreign lands to tame their barbarian habits
to propagate
and instill in them our civilization.
Other fragments of information survive in provincial archives and imperial decrees, in an official history, a few surviving maps, and the memoirs of a translator who sailed with the fleet. This film will search for the true story of Zheng He's journeys.
Those who accompanied Zheng He on the fleet were regarded as heroes, and we worshipped them.
Zheng He sailed when Henry V was King of England, when most people thought the world was flat.
We have traversed immense waters. Behold waves like mountains, set eyes on far distant barbarian regions.
With clues ancient and modern, these two one-hour programs will follow in the wake of the mighty Starfleet.
Our sails unfurled like clouds, continuing their course.
The first program will trace the fleet's passage through ancient temples and trade routes to the ports of modern Asia, Arabia, and Africa. The second program will follow Gavin Menzies' theory to see how and if the fleet crossed the Atlantic to America. It was almost by accident that Gavin Menzies first stumbled on the story of the man he believes was the Chinese Columbus.
When I wrote the book, I pinned my evidence on the fact that the first European explorers all had charts showing them where they were going. Columbus had a map of the Caribbean. Magellan had a map of the world. Somebody discovered the world before Europeans did.
The maps of those early explorers have all disappeared, but maps indicating islands on the far side of the Atlantic have survived, and this convinced Menzies that someone must have mapped parts of the New World long before Columbus. To begin with, he thought it must have been the Portuguese.
So I went to the Portuguese ambassador in London, and he said, "We'll introduce you to the keeper of the Torre de Tombo in Lisbon."
The Torre de Tombo is one of Portugal's great national libraries.
So I started going through the records.
If Menzies could prove that Portuguese explorers had crossed the Atlantic and mapped parts of the Caribbean before Columbus, it would be, by any standards, a world scoop. But what he found instead was evidence that led him to believe that as early as 1428, there had been a map of the world that predated those early Portuguese voyages of exploration. His source was a Portuguese historian, writing more than 100 years after the event, who claimed this map had indicated both the Cape of Good Hope and the Straits of Magellan. If there ever was such a map, it no longer exists. But Menzies was convinced.
Far from the Portuguese having discovered these islands in the Caribbean 70 years before Columbus, what in fact happened was that they didn't know about them. My whole book had to be rethought.
Years of research lay in ruins. Menzies drowned his sorrows in a bar in Lisbon, but a nagging question was left in his mind. If the Portuguese were not the first to map the far side of the Atlantic, who was?
England and France were at the end of the 100 Years' War. They were bust. Venice was in political turmoil. They were out of the picture. The Islamic world was again in complete turmoil. It could only have been China.
In 1402, China was centuries ahead of the West in learning and technology. This was the era of the Ming Dynasty, one that would last from 1368 to 1644. The third Ming emperor had just usurped the throne and was keen to stamp his authority on the vast country and state bureaucracy he now ruled.
This painting shows the prosperity of the Ming capital. Zhu Di saw himself as a great emperor. He wanted to surpass all his ancestors and build the greatest empire.
To enhance the prestige of his throne, the emperor sought to expand trade and diplomatic contacts with the outside world.
He wanted to improve the relations with neighboring countries. So Zheng He's mission was to be political. It aimed to spread and increase the power of the Ming dynasty. The emperor encouraged the tribute system. Indeed, ambassadors poured into the Chinese court to pay tributes, demonstrating the pulling power of the Chinese throne. You pay us tributes, and we bestow benefits on you. By giving you back in benefits more than your tributes were worth, we showed we were a more powerful country and maintained moral superiority. Very typical Chinese thinking.
His traditionally minded Confucian courtiers advised against an ambitious and expensive foreign policy. They maintained that China as a land power should be self-sufficient, turning its back on the barbarians beyond the seas. But Zhu Di believed that seeking wealth and renown abroad would secure his throne at home. So in 1403, he ordered that a great fleet be built. For the next 30 years, it would fly the flag around the Indian Ocean and extend the tribute network throughout the known world. Dockyards were made ready to build the fleet.
20 years ago, this was sea. The houses here were only built since then. You can imagine these buildings as Zheng He's treasure boats. And Zheng He's first task was to build more ships.
Amazingly, in the heart of the former capital, Nanjing, the great dry docks can still be seen 6 centuries later.
The people here told me that as late as 1949, these were still linked to the sea. The docks were enormous. The length was 1.5 miles. The width, 500 yards. They were made up of 7 dry docks. This is number 6. It is on record that the emperor once borrowed 10,000 workers from here to build a monument. So over 20,000 probably worked here. It must have been an extraordinary sight.
The fleet under construction consisted of several hundred ships, including a handful of giant treasure junks.
You see those wooden stakes? They were not to fortify the bank, but to support the boats from beneath so the workers could work on them. Here in 1957, we found a huge rudder, 11 yards long. I saw it myself.
Archaeologists concluded the rudder post was 600 years old and 33 feet long, part of an enormous junk. An entry in the Ming Annals says the ships were 44 zhang in length. That translates to over 400 feet, 5 times longer than the flagship of Christopher Columbus.
Treasure junks was recorded to be 50 yards wide and over 100 yards long. Were there such large ships? I think there were. Fujian has a long history of shipbuilding. We had very good natural materials, fir trees and pines. Of the 200 ships Zheng He had to build, the big boats must all have been built here.
This group of scholars and naval enthusiasts has raised the money to reconstruct a Ming junk, but they're still arguing about what size it should be.
The largest treasure boat was no more than 200 feet.
Too small, far too small.
My sources are accurate. This drawing is from Zheng He's time.
No. Experts agree a large boat with 3 layers of planks would be strong enough, and so would the keel. We checked it again and again.
With the technology and materials we have today, it's difficult to build such a big boat, but we cannot yet say it's impossible.
Many believe that 450-foot ships were feasible because of their multiple bulkheads. Inspired by the way bamboo grows in sections, this Chinese design gave their ships great strength.
In 1407, the eunuch Cheng He built huge boats in Changle to sail to the Western Ocean. The Ministry of War wanted Fujian province to build 100 of the fleet's ships. The next year, it ordered another 5 huge ones.
With the whole weight of the Ming state behind it, the scale of this enterprise was awesome. Carpenters, sailmakers, and blacksmiths were drafted in from across the country. Archaeologists have dug up evidence of the new technologies that were deployed. As with the Titanic, bulkheads divided the ships into watertight compartments. Outer hulls were triple planked for strength. Steered by that great Chinese invention, the stern rudder, as many as 9 masts carried the sails that propelled the great treasure junks.
All the ships of Zheng He's fleet were far superior to any of those of Columbus, Magellan, or da Gama.
The emperor planned a series of voyages to win tribute and allegiance from the rulers of the Indian Ocean. He issued seals of office to be presented to local rulers, binding them to his throne. Though some Confucian advisors opposed this venture, he could count on complete support from the court eunuchs. His most trusted eunuch, Zheng He, began assembling the expedition on the broad Yangtze River.
Zheng He arranged his fleet so that the command boats could communicate with the rest of the ships ranged up the Yangtze River.
With a skeleton crew, Zheng He sailed downriver to Taikang, a good place to recruit sailors.
It's a good harbor. The sailors are experienced. They grew up in this river country.
A stele, or inscribed stone tablet, gives the departure dates of the 7 voyages.
The stele records destinations as well as dates of arrival and departure. It states clearly that Zheng He was first to embark from the port of Taichung.
Zheng He recruited key members of his crew from the communities of Muslim Arab seafarers in Fujian province. Arabs had been drawn here by trade. Centuries later, Chinese Muslims still live here, worship in mosques, and recall the day the admiral, a fellow Muslim, stopped in their town.
There was a huge storm that day. When Zheng He came ashore to our town, our ancestors went to meet him at a pavilion on the edge of town. They chatted and played chess, as if they were old friends. He stayed in our village for 2 days. But I don't know the details.
No. It was to recruit sailors and specialists for his fleet. The journey sounded too dangerous. But he convinced us over a game of chess.
He was particularly keen to recruit Arabs. Arabs had a great experience in navigation. They had always played a big role in links between East and West.
The tomb of one of the men Zheng He played chess with is still here. At the time of his visit, there were reported to be over 10,000 Arabs living and trading in the great ports of southern China. In the fall of 1421, Zheng He was ready to embark on the 6th of his 7 great voyages. All he needed now was a fair wind.
His fleet needed a north wind. This began in November. Zheng He still went to the mountain where the fishermen pray for favorable winds. And he too prayed to the goddess of the sea for safety. His men believed in the goddess, and the ceremony was quite a serious affair. They asked for her protection. They feared they would run into danger.
Late November 1421, the winds veered at last, and Admiral Zheng He ordered his great fleet to weigh anchor.
There were between 100 and 200 ships, including 7 great boats for the commanders, boats for horses, people, water, and food.
Personnel, about 30,000, the majority of which were military people.
An eyewitness account said they needed 200 to 300 men just to operate the rudder, sails, and anchors.
Zheng He's fleet would have dwarfed the combined fleets of Europe at the time.
We have set out for the barbarian countries, commanding the multitudes on the fleet. Our one fear is not to succeed. But if all men serve their emperor, then we will succeed.
They were a strange mixture of superstition and science, but they used technology that's still in use today, a Chinese invention, the compass.
We entreat the patriots of the imperially created compass, and those through the ages who have traversed the sea and the great guardian spirits of the 24 directions. We beseech all to protect our ships.
Though sea logs and other records have been destroyed, one of Zheng He's maps has survived.
The charts were drawn for sailors. People assume they are upside down, without latitude and longitude. But the chart puts the actual course of the ship as they sail at the center. So north and south are rotating. The fleet left Taikan Harbor, following east, southeast to reach the open sea. Even today, you could use this to sail to India and Africa.
Zheng He's surviving map is just one of the clues that make it possible to trace the journey he then took.
The journey on the sea was dangerous. At times, mist and cloud came, and you couldn't see nothing. Earth and heaven blended into one vast emptiness.
The fleet had its own embedded historian, Ma Huan, a translator who was to chronicle its voyages.
I followed the mission wherever it went, for I do not know how many thousands of miles. I passed through the various countries with their different seasons, climates, topography, and peoples. I am incapable of literary elegances. I write of these matters with an honest pen, and nothing more.
Ma Huan's account tells us that the fleet sailed down the coast of Vietnam, past Thailand, and on to Malacca in Malaysia, just north of modern Singapore.
Steer 120 degrees by 135. The ship is level with Malacca.
After 3 weeks at sea, Zheng He's fleet arrived at Malacca. Malacca is the gateway to the Indian Ocean and a perfect place to build a supply base for the fleet.
When the treasure ships arrived here, they at once erected a stockade. Inside again, they erected a second stockade, like a small city wall within which they constructed warehouses and granaries.
The Chinese needed a depot. They're a long way from home. They also wanted to control the Straits of Malacca. When you control the straits, you control trade. And this was the other aspect of the Ming Emperor's aspirations. Not only the economic domination, he had to politically dominate.
When the base was threatened by local skirmishes, they backed a local rebel leader, turning him into a puppet king.
The rise of Malacca is intimately tied to support from the Ming. And it was through that support that Malacca came to be one of the great trade ports of the 15th century.
The emperor's official seal confirmed this pact.
The King of Malacca also have this type of seal given by the Emperor of China.
The locals have a more romantic version of this story. Legend tells of a fairy tale marriage that united the Chinese and Malays in friendship.
The Chinese princess and her many handmaidens were brought to our country as a gift to our great king. So pleased was he with her beauty that he gave the great hill of Malacca on which her kinsman might settle.
Today, the hill still serves the Chinese community as a graveyard. The cantonment, or Chinese enclave, which grew up around the fleet's supply base, is still there. Malacca remains today a city shaped by that Chinese contact. And a new statue of Zheng He waits to look down on the town he helped to found.
They marshaled the goods, then they waited till the wind was favorable. In the middle decade of the 5th moon, they put to sea.
Now, for the first time, they struck out into the open sea across the Indian Ocean. At Ceylon, in modern Sri Lanka, they left an inscribed stone stele to record their passing. It does not record their first armed confrontation. For though Zheng He's main purpose was peaceful power projection, he was willing to use force where necessary.
The fleet was threatened by the king of Ceylon. Zheng He was ready to take the island by force.
When you look at the violence which occurred during these voyages, one has to look a bit beyond the rhetoric. That these were less than friendly missions, that there was a huge amount of intimidation involved. When you take 30,000 troops, it's not intended to be a mission of peace and friendship.
The king was taken like an animal in a cage, shivering, begging for his life.
We have a preeminent global power. The Ming in the 15th century, their missions were both a political and an economic attempt to dominate the known world.
The junk sailed on, their holds crammed with the produce of China's massive porcelain and silk industries, keen to gain direct access to the marketplaces of the Indian Ocean. The fleet's own chronicler, Ma Huan, describes how it sailed on to India's Malabar coast and the city of Calicut.
It lies beside the sea, the country of Calicut. This is a great country of the Western Ocean.
The Malabar coast was the fulcrum of the Indian Ocean trade network.
If a treasure ship goes there, it is left entirely to two men to superintend the buying and sailing. A local broker comes and joins them.
When the fleet came, the ship was approached by the local people in small boats. The middlemen, people who were acting as brokers for the collection of goods, and they were translators as well.
They discuss the price of the silks one by one. When the price has been fixed, they write out an agreement. All join hands together, and the broker then says, in such and such a moon, on such and such a day, we have all joined hands and sealed our agreement with a hand clasp. Whether the price be dear or cheap, we will never repudiate it.
Today, little has changed. The Chinese traded their silks and porcelain for spices, which were brought to Cochin and stocked in warehouses. These days, tally sticks coexist with computers. Over the centuries, the spice trade has brought great wealth to Calicut. You can see it to this day in the ornaments that adorn the elephants during temple festivals. Some of that gold may well have come from the ancient trade with China.
There was an old saying, if the China is the place where you make money, Cochin is the place where you spend it. There was an old saying like that. So most of the spices was taken from Cochin, and they were in return given gold. You can see the ornaments on the top of elephants. The way of income for the Cochin kingdom was through spice trade, because there was no gold in India.
The Chinese chronicler Ma Huan was struck by how much the two great civilizations had in common.
Here we have engraved a stone, a perpetual declaration for 10,000 ages. He says that a journey from this country to China is more than 100,000 li, yet the people are very similar, happy and prosperous, and with identical customs.
Local dance theater owes much to its contact with the Chinese.
Very many art forms of coastal India, very clear kind of influence of the Chinese opera influencing the local art forms. Various dance drama performances are straightaway replicas of Chinese opera.
The story of tonight's play is that of the Monkey King, a mythical character who is common to Indians and Chinese. The Starfleet had already sailed an incredible 6,000 miles. It was now ready for the next leg of its journey. As we followed this journey, it's surprising how much of our modern world would still be familiar to Zheng He's sailors. 600 years ago, Asian seafarers were enormously skilled and knowledgeable. Zheng He did not need to venture into a complete unknown. His navigators did exactly what merchants do to this day. They hired local pilots to set the course from India's Malabar coast to the fabled lands of Arabia.
The local traders who were traveling in fairly big vessels had better know-how, so definitely such people's help was essential. And certainly people who were coming to the coast for the first time must have been guided by them.
They would have been picking up pilots there, either Arab or Indian pilots, to come across because there was a lively trade going on. You'd find the info from the local knowledge from the pilots that would be available there, from the captains that had sailed over, perhaps were waiting to come back to Arabia themselves. So you would ask around, you'd get, they know when to leave, they know when they'd be coming here. The knowledge would be freely available.
The Ming fleet weighed anchor and sailed away from the coast of India. The Chinese could certainly use some local knowledge. Their own methods for predicting wind and weather were, to say the least, idiosyncratic. Fortunately for them, help was at hand. Then, as now, Indian pilots knew all about the seasonal monsoon winds, which is so crucial in this part of the world.
During the monsoon season, vessels mainly depending on sails can start from Arabia and come to India with least effort. If you try to go in the opposite direction, you will be wasting your time in the sea.
The journey from India to Arabia would have been timed to coincide with the second half of the monsoon season, when the winds reversed direction.
The winds which were blowing from southwest to northeast will blow in the exactly opposite direction. From northeast, they will blow to southwest.
That's why Indian spice traders always timed their journeys to coincide with the phases of the monsoon. Chinese scholars who have studied the fleet's surviving charts say that Chinese navigation was more sophisticated than their techniques for predicting wind and weather.
We still have 4 original charts from Zheng He's voyages for crossing the Indian Ocean. We use the sun by day. We use the stars at night. We use the height of the star to determine the position of the ship, its latitude. Going from Calicut to Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, they used many stars, but the main one was the pole star.
Chinese navigators also tapped into the knowledge of the Arabs, the greatest astronomers of the period.
If you look at the stars, we know how they found their positioning in the sea. They used a kamal, a square board, lined up the bottom edge with a horizon and the top edge with a pole star. From that, they could calculate their latitude. The Arabs were the great navigators. They were the prime link throughout the Indian Ocean. Two examples. The compass came from us to them and then to Europe. The kamal is an Arab invention, but we adapted it to suit us.
The Chinese and the Arabs both used the same techniques to navigate by the stars. And after 4 centuries of trade between these two great civilizations, it has become difficult to decide who learned what from whom.
The Arabs had sets of navigation, well, some of them were poems, some of us just really pilot books, where they could tell the prospective navigators, okay, on a certain day you leave this port if you want to go to another port. And it would also tell how to get from one port to another.
This Arab pilot book was written in rhyme to help sailors remember which stars would guide them to which ports.
It speaks about the direction, the area where we are, the exact ports and stars positioning. Okay. Also, you could follow what for them was the mouth of the lion, which is part of a scorpion. It's kind of a collection of stars together, and if you follow the timings right, then you reach exactly on that direction.
Blown by the northeast monsoon, the Starfleet entered the Straits of Hormuz, the very hub of Arabian trade routes. A 100 years earlier, the ancient Silk Road across the landmass of Asia had been cut by Mongol conquests. The Chinese were keen to re-engage with the Arab world and reconnect with a network of caravan routes that crisscrossed the Middle East and terminated at the trading towns that lined the Persian Gulf. The fleet at anchor became a vast emporium, exchanging silk and porcelain for the luxuries carried here to the marketplaces of Hormuz, Kalhat, and Sohar.
Sohar, for instance, was described in the 15th century to be the most active trading port city in the whole of the East. And that made it easier for China to bring their goods into Sohar and take others from all over. Items that were traded in Sohar came all the way from Europe and also all the way from the various parts of Africa.
Tom Vosmer has been excavating another of these ports, Kalhat in Oman.
This being Chinese, probably 15th century.
The foreshore is littered with evidence of Chinese visits to the Persian Gulf. 600 years ago, this port would have been swarming with camel caravans and foreign merchants.
More Chinese Saladin. We'd probably have these coming across from Hormuz because the Chinese were landing a lot of their goods at Hormuz, and we have a real good connection with Hormuz here. They would have anchored down in here. There's a bay there. We found a lot of stone anchors there that date to this same period. So that sort of confirms in our minds that this was the port area.
Chinese learned this was a good place to buy horses. The loss of the Silk Road had cut China off from Central Asia at the very time when threats from beyond the Great Wall left China in urgent need of new mounts for its cavalry.
At that time, horses were fetching about 100 pieces of silver, and our historian has discovered that a male slave was only 5. So a horse was fabulously valuable, yeah, and the people were making a lot of money from that sort of thing.
The Chinese were open to the learning of Arab scientists, who back then were the most knowledgeable in the world. The Chinese had recently suffered outbreaks of plague, and medicine was high on their list of priorities. Zheng He had recruited over 100 Chinese doctors and pharmacologists to seek out new medicines. Arabia is still a cornucopia of medicinal herbs and countless other remedies.
هذا من جبل الأخضر من وادي مستل من بلد الطايين في المكان هذا وهذا يستخدم عن وجع البطن عن وجع القلب عن وجع كل شيء سوى فيه.
This is sa'tar. As he said, it came from Jabal al-Akhdar, and it used for the stomach ache and for the heart, and you can take this with the sugar and mix with the hot water and take it like a tea, and it is good for the stomach.
Frankincense, myrrh, cinnabar, and storax were processed, dried, and packed away in jars for their eventual return journey. There was one more piece of invaluable information that the Chinese could learn from the Arabs, for it was they who held the key to Africa. The Chinese had long known of the Dark Continent, and centuries earlier, Chinese goods had reached these shores on Arab sailing boats. The stated aim of this, the 6th voyage, was to return ambassadors from African cities who had previously journeyed to China. But the fascination with Africa ran much deeper. Arab vessels had traded slaves and gold for centuries. But by the time the Ming fleet arrived, the stage was set for a different kind of exchange. Far from being primitive societies, there were African nations that had traded their way to great wealth, and stone-built cities lined the coast.
A town like Pati at this time has about 9 gates, huge buildings, palaces, and we have huge mosques. These towns are now showing some kind of prestige that they have achieved this much wealth, they have achieved this much power. They now have to symbolically also show that they are important.
For African rulers, blue and white Ming porcelain, delicate and exotic, became the ultimate status symbol.
In these round niches, they used to put the porcelain bowls, which would look like this. And the bowls were meant for decoration purposes, right? This bowl is a 15th century Chinese bowl. The people around here had a psychological feeling that the shards of these particular bowls, once they are taken and kept in the suitcases, the people will become rich or wealthy. So a good number of them were taken for such a purpose.
The treacherous shoals on the African coastline took their toll on Chinese trading vessels.
This is nice.
There's even a special word for those who were shipwrecked here. They're known as the Famau. Off the coast of Kenya, there's an island where it is said that descendants of some of these Chinese castaways can still be found. Their stories have been passed down through the village's own keeper of tales.
One of the Chinese family is nearby, and Mansuri, he can take us there. He knows the family.
The Farooq household was one of the 4 Famau families on the island. Bibi Farooq believes her shipwrecked ancestor came from China.
They had a shipwreck, and they came, that was in Shanga, and then they came to Siu, and then they got married to the locals. And even the name of her mother is called Safina, meaning it's a dhow which saved these people from the shipwreck to bring them to the seashore. And now they are the descendants of those Chinese people who had a shipwreck.
Ndivyo hivyo. Basi vile mzee na kidogo kinaeleza. Basi vile mkiwa huko mvundikiwa wakawa ni wenye kutembea tu. Sasa kwa hivyo ni waume lazima watakuwa wana hamu na wenye muhimu pia mpaka wafahamu sikisiwa kile.
Therefore they had it about it from the parents, and it's the story of the town. Everyone knows in the village about the shipwreck.
But what incentive led the Ming fleet to brave the risks of a 10,000-mile ocean voyage to Africa?
Came to bring tortoiseshell back to China, which they would use for a variety of things. Rhino horns, like these horns from black rhinos, would be brought back to China, and they were mostly used for the making of medicines to lower fever. They prefer the bigger...
Esmond Martin has dedicated much of his life to stamping out the now illegal trade that brought the Chinese to Kenya.
And this would be bigger than the average tusk that you would find in Asia. And this is soft ivory as well, as a distinction. The forest elephants of Asia produce a hard ivory, which is more difficult to carve. And the Chinese have always liked soft ivory, so this African ivory that they would get from East Africa was superior.
5 centuries ago, the trade in tusks would have dwarfed the stacked seas from modern poachers in the fight to save Africa's wildlife. But the Chinese motives were mixed. While some filled the holds of their treasure ships with ivory and rhinoceros horn, others were searching out new and wonderful animals for the emperor's menagerie. What lured the Ming Starfleet to Africa may have been a hunger for the exotic, and Africa had much to offer. A contemporary illustrator recorded a host of fantastic beasts: the rhinoceros, the ostrich, and the zebra. Their 16th century illustrated book of strange countries records their wonder. And here on the savannas, they came across the greatest prize of all, an animal so strange, so unusual, that it seemed to fit the description of the legendary qilin, the Chinese equivalent of the unicorn. Arrangements were made to bring it back to confer good fortune on the emperor himself.
But they actually did it, to me, is mind-boggling. And then getting it onto the boat, have no idea how they did that, keeping it in a boat for all those months in storms, it must have been a feat.
You know, she has a weird balance, these spindly legs and that heavy body. You know, you may have noticed when a giraffe gallops, they kind of pull forwards and they get this rocking motion. If something puts that rocking out, they'll go over head over heels. And so maybe on a boat that would also be a bit of a problem.
History does not record how they transported their living treasure across 8,000 miles of sea. But 3 months later, the imperial palace was mesmerized by the sight of the giraffe.
Court officials, craning their necks, looked on with pleasure and stamping their feet when they were scared or startled, thinking that these were things that were rarely heard of in the world and that China had never seen their likeness.
The giraffe had come from the ends of the earth to be recorded in the meticulous records of the Forbidden City. The achievements of Zheng He and the Starfleet rank as some of the greatest in naval history. But for centuries, this story has been largely confined to China, unknown to and unrecognized by the rest of the world. In the next hour, this program will examine the astonishing claim that Chinese sailors went beyond the edge of the known world, crossed the Atlantic, discovered America, and became the first to circumnavigate the globe.